What's up, Ramley? You are now in the kitchen with Chef Nixon for all your fixings for the latest and greatest of VCU men's basketball. So, this Saturday, VCU hosted George Mason University. How'd it go? Let's get into it. All right, so this is a battle for the number one spot VCU versus George Mason, both teams at the top of the conference. All right, George Mason enters this game with a record of 25-5. They're 12-1 within the conference, and GMU is riding a remarkable 12-game winning streak. Uh, Not every game they have dominated. No, not every game has been easy for George Mason. However, they're still on a 12-game win streak, uh, and they find a way to pull these games out. So something has to be said for their toughness, their mental toughness, their physical toughness, their resilience, um, all in which they demonstrated is just remarkable. Um, the thing about George Mason, not only do they have a remarkable coach, Tony Skinn, who's a former George Mason player, is part of that team, went to the Final Four, so he knows a little bit about winning and what it takes to win and what it takes to make a run, what it takes to face high quality teams and be successful. Um, but George Mason is also ranked number one in defense within the A10. They're holding opponents to 62.4 points per game. However, they do have an issue. Their offense is severely lacking. They their offense is ranked 12th in the A10, um, averaging 71.1 points per game, and that's why they have so many close games. But that's why they're always in games, and that's why they always can pull out games and win them because their defense is remarkable. And if their offense had a tick up, then they would be a really tough team, really tough team to beat. They already are. They show they have mental toughness down the stretch in multiple games. They show that they'll never give up, so they have some fight back to them. Um, but GMU is led by Jalen Haynes. He's averaging 13 points per game, 7 rebounds. Um, when I first watched the game, I didn't really know this, but my guy is from Florida, and now that I know that, I look back at the game and see, yeah, I get it. I get it. I get it. And now he's my favorite player that isn't a VCU player. Um, and then also Darius Maddox, who is a Virginia Tech transfer. He's averaging 14 points per game and 3 rebounds. So the biggest question for George Mason is, will their defense be enough? Can they keep the game close and thrive in critical minutes? That's going to be the most important part for them because VCU is a monster in itself. Speaking of VCU, they entered this game with a record of 21-5, identical to George Mason. They are 11-2 in the conference, dropping the first game to St. Bonaventure, and then dropping a game to St. Louis at St. Louis. VCU is coming in on this game riding a win streak themselves, 5-game win streak. Most recently demolishing UMass. Shout out to Coach Edwards. I know they're tired of VCU, but they demolished them 80-51. Now VCU seems to be facing the toughest match yet. Um, so just like VCU, like GMU, is at the top of the A10 in defense. And let me show you how close this is. I just said that George Mason is holding opponents to 62.4 points per game. VCU is literally, you see that, literally this close from being the number one team in offense and defense. They're holding opponents to 62.5 in scoring. And like I said, the cat's out the bag. Unlike GMU, VCU is ranked number one offensively, averaging 78.2 points per game. They get their points from their usual suspects. I'm going to say this now just because it's on my mind. I wonder, there's little rumblings about Zeb Jackson and Phil Russell having an extra year due to some, you know how everybody get extra year now. But there is a possibility of them coming back. But outside of that, if that isn't possible, VCU is going to lose a lot of scoring next year and maybe a head coach. But that's a conversation for another thing, for another time down the road. So they have the usual suspects scoring: Matt Shoga, Joe Bamasil, doing their thing. And Jack Clark is coming in on a heater. He's averaging 17 points per game, 17 and a half points per game these last two games. So the question is, can VCU handle George Mason stifling defense, and can they still produce the offense that they're used to producing? That's going to be the question. So let's get into the game. Now, this game has had a lot of build-up, a lot of backstory, um, being that both teams are good. George Mason wasn't expected to be as good as they are, but they've been doing very well. VCU's projected to be the number one team in the conference since the beginning, and here we are trying to battle. This also is a throwback CAA rivalry game. Now, the rivalry of George Mason and VCU has never been something as like Richmond or ODU per se, but it's always just been a basketball, good basketball programs always going head to head. So it's always been there, but it's never really been a feud. If you rewind, we used to go hang we used to go hang out with George Mason guys. George Mason guys come down, I would go up. So there's always been a lot of love there, but on the court, it's been a battle. Also, Tony Skinn, like I said, this is his first time back in the stew since he wore the George Mason jersey. In that VCU, that year that George Mason went to the Final Four. I don't know if many remember, but that was the same year that Eric Maynor. That was the same year Eric Maynor had a remarkable coming out performance against who else? George Mason. So there's a lot of history. There's a lot of build up within this game, and it's all coming to a head. It all came to a head this Saturday. So as of what I said earlier, this is going to be a defensive battle, and that's what it's shown to be in the first half. Both teams were really struggling to get the ball rolling. Bamboye, two fouls early, put Furman in earlier than he expected, I assume. But we'll get to that. But it was such a defensive struggle. At the 10-minute mark, I think it was 21 points combined by both teams at the 10-minute mark. And we all know, the Ramley, we know that VCU is not even a slow team. They're just a second half team. I can't say they're a slow starting team. They're not. But they're just a second half team. But this was something else. It was a lot of early jitters, bad shots. I didn't really think Furman came in the game ready to play. I don't think he expected to get in the game as quickly as he did. And sometimes when you're on the coming off the bench role, you like to get a feel for the game. I don't think he really got a chance to get a feel. He was just kind of thrown in there, and the intensity was so high. It was kind of hard for him to catch up immediately. The physicality in this game was tremendous. I love how refs allow players to play. I always say this: basketball is a physical sport. It's a physical sport. I hate how ticky-tack basketball can be with certain refs, but allow the guys to play. You know what I mean? Now there was a lot of fouls called. However, it wasn't your ticky-tack fouls. The game was so physical that you had to call certain calls to keep the game calm, or at least moving in the flow well. I thought that George Mason had a really good game plan initially to stop VCU. They did a lot of doubling on Max early. But there's a couple things I have to say. For one, I'm very proud of this VCU team. And for the Ramley that's been around and listening to me for years, you understand that sometimes when your offense isn't going, it can hurt your defense. But that is a sign of an immature team. Luckily for us, we have guys that have a wife and kids and grandkids already, because we have fifth and sixth year seniors. But but the fact that the scoring was so little in this first half, but we still found ways to still commit to the defensive end was extremely satisfying for me. It was promising for me because that shows that down the road when it's going to happen, because it's going to happen again down the road if we're in the tournament, the A10 tournament or the big dance or wherever we land, I know that we're going to be able to compete at a high level because we don't allow our offense to dictate our defense. There were a couple of times where George Mason would have a broken play, and our communication and our togetherness on the defensive end was just remarkable to watch. And this game has a lot of highlight plays. And when I mean highlight plays, not a lot of one-on-one stuff, but just really good team basketball. And we'll talk about some later. But just really good team basketball offensively and defensively. Now, in an environment like Saturday, where I got to give a shout out to the Ram because the stew was packed, it was loud, we had active fans. Now, we usually have fans. In the stew. But this Saturday, everybody was active. People were on their feet. People were chanting. People were singing. People were dancing. Everybody was having a good time. The energy was there. It was like the old school stew where people hated to come in there because they knew that they had to deal with the sixth man, which was us. So I know George Mason felt that. I texted Zev earlier today, like, yo, I know you felt the difference of how involved the crowd was. Watching back, I've seen clips of how like you're trying to hear the call, but you could barely hear the call because the stew was so loud. It was so beautiful to be a part of that. It was so beautiful to see it. I just wanted to get back to that and make it a routine. You got to keep building on that. But in an environment like that, there is nobody, and I do mean nobody, who thrives in that more than Phil Russell. Phil Russell, I'm not sure if he's experienced, like on his side. He's probably been in other gyms where it was really loud and rambunctious, but for the Ramley to be rallying the way we were, I'm not sure if he ever experienced that, and he just thrives in the Phil Russell hustle was in full effect. Two instances. He draws two offensive fouls in the first half of this game. The first one, I believe Furman gets a layup. We're pressing, full court man to man. Phil Russell finds the matchup. KD Johnson, a little bit of a hothead already. He goes in there and gives him just enough of a nudge. Not enough to get called for a foul, but just enough of a nudge for Johnson to realize, oh, he just pushed me. As soon as he goes to retaliate, Phil wins an Oscar and flies on all over the floor. I mean, it was perfectly set up. And before Johnson even realized he was being played, the referee calls a foul. And he almost got a tech. But another shout out to the refs. Because they could have been, even though it would have been in our favor, they could have been crabs and called like an extra tech and gave us a free throw. But they didn't. They just said, common foul, let's keep it rocking. And that's how rivalry games should be played. There's going to be fouls. There's going to be hard fouls. Nobody's out here really trying to kill nobody. But the game is physical. So Phil Russell. The Phil Russell hustle was in full effect. The next opportunity was later in the half. Haynes has the ball at the top of the key. Somehow there was a switch on the defensive end, and Phil ends up on him. Phil immediately takes up his space. So all Haynes really did was swipe through hard. Now, if that was Furman, nothing gets called. But being that it's Phil, as soon as he felt contact, he goes flying. Another offensive foul. The Phil Russell hustle is amazing to watch. And I know I'm talking about this a lot, but if you ever get a chance to watch Phil and truly pay attention to him, he's constantly talking to his opponents. And not just the guy he's guarding, but anybody. He's constantly talking, just saying. I can imagine it's a bunch of gibberish, a bunch of nothing. Maybe saying your wife tastes like Honey Nut Cheerios. I don't know. He could be saying anything. He's actively involved with the fans. Every time there's a play made, he's actively involved with the fans. He's actively involved with his teammates, cheering them on, hyping them up. You know what I mean? So to do all that and still be able to go out there, remember your plays, go out there, produce on the offensive end, it's a beautiful thing to watch. Shout out to Phil Russell, the Phil Russell hustle in full effect. All right, now, with that low scoring but exciting first half of basketball, George Mason went into the half 24-23. Now, this season, like I said, we're a second half team. And if any team has a chance of truly beating us outside of us just being stone cold like in St. Louis, you are going to really have to put your foot in our ass early in the half. If you don't, especially when we had a cold first half, it's not going to happen 2 halves in a row. We have too much talent for it. So if we have a cold first half, you better believe we're going to come out guns a-blazing. And that's exactly what we did. And to my surprise and also to my delight, it wasn't just us coming out there hitting threes. It was purely started from the defensive end leading to the offensive end. It was beautiful to see. 2 plays that really caught my attention. 2 plays that were standout plays. I told you this game had a lot of highlights within it, and it weren't anything like individually. The first one, we're doing such a really good job of pressing that Mason has to rely on Haynes, their power forward / center, to bring the ball up the court. Bam Boye, 2 fouls, maybe 3 fouls at this point in time, is doing a great job of heating the ball up. Now, what Mason doesn't or didn't realize during this is you have your big saying clear out. Any true point guard would have went and got the ball. But I don't think Mason has a true point guard. Not yet. They may have some young guys that are still being groomed, but they don't have a true point guard just yet. But any true point guard would have went and got the ball. However, they allow Haynes, because he is a good player, they allow him to clear out. And he goes one-on-one with Bam Boye. Bam Boye does a really good job making him turn, being physical, staying with him step by step. Going up, he gets a monster rejection, monster block. So much so that it leads to transition. Max comes down, hits a midi. One play, that defense directly led to offense. The next play, Zeb Jackson, a ball hound, making Mason's point guard, who's a freshman at this point in time, play with the ball instead of just going up the court. He's playing with the ball, and you can't, when you're dealing with a guy with quick feet and quick hands, you can't keep crossing over in front of him. But he did. And Zeb got the pluck, and it led to the dunk. And then the roof comes off. And VCU goes on this 15-0 run, which really sets the tone for the half it was. VCU finished with 70 points, but they had 23 at half. So they had a huge second half, right? I have here in my notes that Phil is a lunatic. That's literally, I said, Phil is a lunatic that you would love to have on your team. But I didn't realize this until I got home and I rewatched the game. But I have 2 favorite parts of the game, and both are involving Phil Russell. Number 1, Zeb, the pass to Zeb. Hold on, let me rewind, because I also didn't realize this until I rewatched it. There's a clip going around of VCU's ball movement, and it starts with Max Shoga making the move, hesitation, kicks it to the corner. It gets kicked to Phil Russell. He pump fakes, drives, kicks it to Zeb. Zeb one more is it to the corner to Max, hits the 3. Beautiful textbook offense, textbook ball movement. any coach, any clinic would be proud of that play. The very next play, slightly broken play, Zeb drives, collapses the defense, kicks it to Phil. Phil drives, Zeb replaces him in the corner. Phil sees that coming a mile away, passes the ball between his legs for a Zeb wide open three. He knocks it down. Crowd goes wild. Amazing. Amazing, amazing teamwork. Amazing teamwork. Watching them play offense makes me so proud to be part of the Ramblin'. Now the next play that I like happened probably like a minute later. Matter of fact, it probably was the next play because no, it wasn't. It was a few minutes later. This was after Zeb penetrates again, kicks it to Furman. Furman comes down and dunks it baseline. Running back Haynes sets a mean screen on Max, blindsides him in transition. Ref calls the foul. Max, acknowledging that there's no need for that at this point, at this juncture in the game, starts doing push-ups because he knows it is what it is. We won this. Phil running over there and doing the push-ups with him was some of the funniest stuff I've seen all year. And I kept rewinding that, and I must have sat there and watched that 20 to 50 times. I just love this team. I love this team, and I'm really excited to see how far they can go. And I hope the only thing stopping this team is the Kool-Aid, and we got to keep them off the Kool-Aid. Help me, help them stay off the Kool-Aid. So that led basically that was basically the end of the game. VCU ended up getting out of this game, even though it was competitive. It was a comfortable win, 70-54 over George Mason, putting VCU number 1 in the conference. For George Mason, Jalen Haynes had 10 points, 8 rebounds, and a lot of trash talking. KD Johnson had 12 points, 3 rebounds, and 2 assists. Most of that was done in the first half. For VCU, Max led the way, having 22 points, 5 rebounds. Jack continued his hot shooting, having 12 points, 9 rebounds. And mind you, I don't want to breeze past that because if Jack is playing well, it really takes VCU to a whole nother level. You know you got Max, you know you got Bam Vasily, you know you got Phil, you know you got Zeb. But when Jack is playing at this level, it's extremely hard to beat us, and it's evident when he's been playing. So the last 2 games he played well, we smoked both teams. We come here, he plays well, and we damn near smoked down. Even though it was competitive, it still was a smoke, right? So shout out to Jack, and hopefully he can continue that as well. My low-key player of the game has to go to Phil Russell. 11 points, 3 rebounds, 2 assists, and a whole lot of energy. The energy he brought in that game was irreplaceable, unmistakable, and damn right havoc. You know what I mean? It was completely dope to see, especially at the homecoming. Got to catch up with Troy Daniels. Troy Daniels in town. Shout out to Troy. He's doing very, very well for himself. Much love for all the alumni that were there. Much love for all the alumni that couldn't make it. Shout out to Eric Maynard, coaching in the All-Star game. VCU's everywhere. Dave Bliss was a GA. He coached one of the All-Star teams. Head coach one of the All-Star teams. He also helped me with my shot my junior year. So shout out to Dave Bliss. He's the man. So moving forward, VCU will head to the University of Henrico, who is 10-18, 5-10 in the conference. And all I really can say about this game is don't drink the Kool-Aid. Don't drink the Kool-Aid. I think they may have gotten their leading scorer back. But even with that, we're just here. It's here. It's really no comparison within the talent or the togetherness or the chemistry or anything like that. So only thing that matters is that we go there and we play our best game. We focus on what we have to do to be successful. Um, and if we don't drink the Kool-Aid, I'm pretty sure we'll be right there for that. All right. Now that's all I got for y'all, man. Thank you for listening. And until next time, never quit, stay humble. Peace.